You have green eyes.
Blue.
Are they? They're not blue. Now don't tell me that. Look at me a little closer. They're green. See, I fooled you.
The 1970s and 80s were considered the golden age of game shows. Many families sat and watched The Price is Right, Family Feud, and Let's Make a Deal, to name but a few. But from watching these clips of all these game shows, there's one thing that I've noticed, that they've aged poorly compared to today's standards. And it highlighted the creepy behaviour that male hosts had towards the female contestants. A lot of hosts in the 70s were treated like stars, with female guests pressured to not challenge them on some of their totally unacceptable behaviour.
Get your hands off my body.
Oh, alright.
The idea that women might feel pressured or uncomfortable was barely acknowledged by network executives, producers, directors and writers, who were, at that time, overwhelmingly male. If a male host made flirtatious comments, kissed them or touched them, the cultural expectation was that women would just laugh it off. Models, contestants and female panelists were treated as glamorous props more than people. And there were many examples of this, from the likes of Richard Dawson from Family Feud, who was actually known as the Kissing Bandit, for kissing all the female contestants, or Bob Barker from The Price is Right, who had a habit of touching women and making sexual comments about their appearances.
Denise, whisper in my ear, how old are you? Just right.
It was very much of its era, but it highlights how much the culture has thankfully shifted for the better in modern times. But as creepy as their behaviour was, it did actually enable behaviours that were so much worse, and there's one in particular that makes my blood boil that stemmed all the way from Canada in the late 1970s, early 80s, where a host clearly crossed the line involving kids. Now, back in 1979, in CFTO TV studios in the Toronto suburb of Scarborough, Ontario, Catherine Swing came up with a new idea for a game show called Just Like Mom, with the goal of wanting a family-friendly game show centered around parents and kids. Her inspiration came from the American game show The Newlyweds, but in her version it involved kids with their parents. The show first aired in 1980 with Stephen Young as the host for the first season, before Catherine and her husband Fergie Olver, who was a well-known CTV sportscaster, was brought in to co-host. The format of the show involved 3 pairs of children with their mothers. The kids were brought out first and asked 2 questions. Parents would be brought out after and asked the exact same questions. If their answers matched with their kids, they would win points. Then the kids would also partake in a bake-off where the kids had 60 seconds to make some sort of dessert, and the parents had to taste their food and guess which one of their kids made it. So by the end of the show, whoever had the most points got to spin the wheel in the hopes of winning a trip to Disney. So it seemed like a very wholesome, fun, family-orientated show during a time in Canada when kid shows were way more popular than they were in America. And it was successful, as it ran for over 5 years, airing over 500 episodes. Now, in season 1 of the series, the host Stephen Young, who, although had his moments, like how he demanded each kid kiss him at the start of the show, didn't behave as poorly towards the kids as his replacement from season 2 onwards, the then husband of the show's creator, Fergie Olver, who would make a huge impact on the history of the show, but for all the wrong reasons.
You have green eyes.
Blue.
Are they? They're not blue. Now don't tell me that. Look at me a little closer. They're green. See, I fooled you.
The whole tone of the show would shift with Fergie's arrival. None of the kids or the mothers involved seemed in any way comfortable around him. Because the parents were taken off stage and couldn't see or hear the questions that Fergie asked, they were unaware of how close he was to the kids, and the way he asked the questions was totally inappropriate for a child, and you could see it written all over the kids' faces. He would also be fond of touching them and making them feel trapped, and when the mothers did come out, they too would clearly seem to feel uncomfortable by Fergie's behaviour. You could actually see the kids physically move back as Fergie would lean closer to them. Now, during this time period, there seems to be less clear lines concerning child's comfort and consent, and with these interactions, many in the audience saw Fergie's behaviour as somehow cute and innocent. Now, initially, the questions the kids were asked were actually quite light-hearted and family-friendly, but as the seasons passed, some of the questions Fergie asked the kids became totally inappropriate. And not only that, but the tone in which Fergie used on top of that was just downright creepy and wrong to be asking kids who are in the average age group of 7 to 13 years of age.
Hand out kisses, Jennifer?
The kids are very clearly uncomfortable with these questions, with many looking down, not knowing what to say. Some of these questions would become sexual in nature, which I think we would all agree is not the type of question any kid should ever be asked, let alone on live TV.
Got any boyfriends?
Yeah, one.
One boyfriend? What do you do when you're alone together? What do you do too?
Just talk.
You just talk? And that's all?
And the problem with Fergie is he never seemed to see the line that he crossed because he was so far past it. And during this time, we all have to remember that there was producers, directors, an audience, and it aired on TV for years. So clearly they all enabled his behaviour, and it clearly made him feel like he could just do whatever he wanted. Parents who watched the show surely knew the behaviour of the host was creepy and weird, but still brought their kids on anyway. Now, its most infamous moment would come when Fergie, being the creep he clearly is, gets called a dirty old man by his wife Catherine, the then co-host and creator of the show.
A hug and a kiss? Well, I guess you can't win the show then. If I don't get a hug and a kiss. Yeah, you hear that?
So even his own wife was clearly not happy and fed up with his behaviour. Catherine and Fergie would soon separate and later divorce, making the show a lot harder to produce, and in 1985 the show was cancelled altogether because of the declining viewership. And even if you want to argue it's of its time, his behaviour is still wrong, and it poorly reflects how the public viewed the role of kids in our society, with many being treated like mini adults. The crazy thing to me though is that during the show and for decades after, no one batted an eye over his behaviour, no one saw it as weird or creepy or strange. And it's only really in the last 15 years through YouTube and the internet that his behaviour came to light, with compilations being uploaded on the site. And this obviously generated a lot of justified backlash towards him. Now, after his time with the game show, he went back to being a reporter for the Jays games on CTV and later the Boston Broadcasting System, and was also nominated for the Ford C. Frick Award in 2004. He was never criminally charged for any of his behaviour. There was also no complaints filed on set, and there was no lawsuits. He was never legally or criminally charged with anything. And a lot of the behaviour that we are judging him on is based off clips we see on YouTube. Now, in hindsight, Just Like Mom had become a strange cultural time capsule, a reminder of how quickly social norms change, how children's programming has matured over the years, and how behaviours once considered harmless can look deeply uncomfortable decades later. And it shines a light on a culture in which children were allowed to be treated that way, how boundaries around children, consent, and adult behaviour simply did not exist. Now, some might argue that the clips are out of context and it didn't happen in every episode, but my simple rebuttal to that is, what context is this behaviour ever acceptable? And even if it ever only happened one time, which it clearly didn't, it was clearly multiple times as we see, one time is still too many, so there's no real justification for this behaviour. There's no reason for Fergie to be so creepy and close to the kids and kissing them on the mouth. It's so strange to me that this was something that was even accepted at that time. It also makes you think, like, what kind of behaviour happened off camera, not just with Fergie, but with people in general in society when it came to adult-kid dynamics, because if that was allowed on TV, what the hell was going on off camera? But that's it, guys. Thanks so much for watching. Please like, share and subscribe as always. And let me know what you think in the comments down below. I know some people might look at these clips and might think that, oh, you know, I'm being a bit too harsh, or it's not a big deal, it's of its time. But personally, I would find this behaviour intolerable, unacceptable, and it's crazy to me that this kind of behaviour even existed. But I'd love to know what you guys think as always, so do let me know in the comments down below. And if there's any sort of other game shows or game hosts you want me to cover that I can go into more detail on, let me know. But that's it, guys. Thanks so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Peace out.